My sister stole my wedding fund, so I canceled her bridal shower. I never thought my own sister would be the one to destroy my engagement, but here I am, 3 months later, single and broke. Sarah and I had been together for 4 years when I finally proposed last spring. The ring cost me 3 months of overtime, but seeing her face light up made every extra shift worth it. We immediately started planning our dream wedding for the following summer. I had been saving religiously for 2 years, putting away every spare dollar into a separate account. My parents had promised to contribute 5,000, and between my savings and their help, we were looking at a decent budget of 15,000. Nothing fancy, but enough for a beautiful ceremony at the local botanical gardens with close family and friends. The problem started when my younger sister announced her engagement just 2 months after mine. She had always been the family favorite, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I worked 2 jobs to pay for college, she got a full ride from mom and dad. When she needed a car, they bought her one. When I needed transportation, I got a loan for a used Honda. Her engagement party was lavish, thrown by our parents at the country club. Meanwhile, Sarah and I celebrated with pizza and beer at our apartment. I tried not to let it bother me, but the contrast was impossible to ignore. My sister's ring was easily 3 times the size of Sarah's, and she made sure everyone noticed. The real blow came when my sister decided she wanted to get married first, just 3 weeks before our planned date. She claimed it was because her fiancé's family had conflicts with our originally planned date, but I suspected she just couldn't stand not being the center of attention. My parents immediately supported her decision, suggesting Sarah and I postpone our wedding to avoid any conflicts. I was furious but agreed to move our date back by 2 months. Sarah was understanding, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. We had already sent save the dates, booked the venue, and ordered invitations. The venue was gracious enough to let us change dates without penalty, but we lost the deposit on the caterer who couldn't accommodate our new date. Then came the day that changed everything. I was at work when my bank called to inform me about unusual activity on my wedding fund account. Someone had withdrawn $8,000 in 3 separate transactions over the past week. My blood turned to ice as I realized the only other person who had access to that account was my sister. 2 years ago, during a family emergency when my grandmother was hospitalized, I had added her as a joint account holder so she could access funds quickly if needed. I had completely forgotten about it, and apparently so had she until she needed money for her own wedding expenses. When I confronted her that evening, she broke down crying, claiming she had every intention of paying me back after her honeymoon. The worst part was her justification. She said she knew I would understand because we were family, and that her wedding was more important because she was the baby of the family. She had used my money to upgrade her catering package, buy a more expensive dress, and book a luxury honeymoon in Italy. $8,000 of my carefully saved money gone in a week. I demanded she return the money immediately, but she claimed it was impossible. The vendors had already been paid, and she and her fiancé had spent their savings on other wedding expenses, counting on my money to cover the big-ticket items. She promised to pay me back in installments after they returned from their honeymoon, but I knew that would take years. When I told my parents what had happened, their response was even more devastating than my sister's betrayal. They sided with her, saying it was just money and that family was more important. They suggested I should be happy to help my sister have her dream wedding, and that Sarah and I were young enough to wait another year or two to get married. Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see the strain this was putting on our relationship. We had already sent out new invitations, and now I had to call everyone to explain that we were postponing again. Some relatives had already booked flights, and my future in-laws had arranged time off work. The embarrassment was overwhelming. The breaking point came when I discovered my sister had posted photos on social media of her dress shopping trip, bragging about her designer gown and how her family had come together to make her dream wedding possible. The comments from relatives praising my parents for their generosity made my stomach turn. They had no idea the money came from my wedding fund. I made the hardest decision of my life and canceled our wedding entirely. Sarah was devastated, and honestly so was I. But I couldn't ask her to marry me with borrowed money and a ceremony that would constantly remind us of my family's betrayal. She deserved better than a wedding funded by credit cards and resentment. My sister's bridal shower was planned for the following weekend, and I was expected to attend and smile like nothing had happened. The shower was being held at my aunt's house, and I was supposed to help set up and contribute to the group gift. Instead, I decided to take back some control of the situation. I called my aunt and explained the entire situation. She was horrified and immediately offered to cancel the shower, but I had a better idea. I suggested we turn it into a lesson about consequences and family responsibility. My aunt was hesitant at first, but when I explained how my sister had not only stolen from me but also destroyed my relationship, she agreed to help. The morning of the shower, I arrived early to help set up as planned. My sister was glowing, excited about her upcoming celebration, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Family members and friends began arriving, bringing beautifully wrapped gifts and warm congratulations. After everyone had arrived and the initial socializing was done, my aunt called for attention to begin the gift-opening ceremony. Instead of starting with the presents, she announced that there was something important that needed to be addressed before the celebration could continue. I stood up and calmly explained to everyone present exactly what had happened. I told them how my sister had stolen $8,000 from my wedding fund, how my parents had supported her actions, and how this had ultimately destroyed my engagement and relationship with Sarah. The room fell completely silent. My sister's face went from glowing happiness to mortified shame in seconds. She tried to interrupt, to explain, to justify, but I continued speaking. I told everyone how she had used my money to upgrade her wedding, while I was forced to cancel mine entirely. I explained how my parents had chosen to support her theft rather than demand she make it right. Several relatives immediately stood up and left, taking their gifts with them. My grandmother, who had always been my favorite family member, looked at my sister with such disappointment that she started crying. My sister's future mother-in-law, who had been so excited about the shower, suddenly looked uncomfortable and began making excuses to leave early. The shower effectively ended right there. Within 30 minutes, half the guests had left, and the remaining ones were sitting in awkward silence. My sister locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing, while my parents tried to do damage control. But it was too late. The truth was out, and the family dynamics that had protected my sister for years were finally exposed. My aunt later told me that several relatives had called her afterward, expressing their disgust at what had happened and their support for my decision to expose the truth. Some even offered to help me rebuild my wedding fund, though I politely declined. The damage to my relationship with Sarah was already done. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My sister's wedding guest list shrank by nearly half, as relatives chose not to attend after learning the truth. Several family members who had planned to give generous gifts changed their minds entirely. My parents were forced to cover the additional expenses they had originally planned to split with other family members. My sister made one final attempt to fix things, showing up at my apartment 3 days before her wedding with a check for $2,000. She claimed it was all she could manage for now, but promised to pay the rest over time. I looked at her standing there in her designer dress, wearing jewelry that cost more than my monthly rent, and felt nothing but disgust. I told her the money was no longer the issue. She had shown me exactly what kind of person she was, and more importantly, what kind of family I had. The theft was bad enough, but the complete lack of remorse and the expectation that I should just accept being robbed by my own sister was unforgivable. The wedding went on as planned, but it was a shadow of what it should have been. Half the expected guests didn't show up, and those who did seemed uncomfortable and distracted. My parents tried to maintain appearances, but the tension was obvious to everyone. I didn't attend despite the family pressure and guilt trips. Sarah and I tried to work through everything, but the damage was too deep. She couldn't understand how I could completely cut off my family, and I couldn't understand how she could expect me to forgive what they had done. We broke up 2 months after my sister's wedding, and she moved back to her hometown shortly after. The holidays that year were miserable. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, declining all invitations from family members who were trying to play peacemaker. My parents sent cards and texts, but I ignored them all. My sister made a few attempts to reach out, but I blocked her number after the third voicemail. 6 months later, I heard through my grandmother that my sister and her husband were having serious financial problems. Apparently, the lavish lifestyle they had maintained during their engagement had continued into their marriage, and they were now drowning in debt. My grandmother mentioned that they had asked my parents for help, but Mom and Dad were still recovering from the unexpected wedding expenses. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that my sister was finally facing consequences for her actions. The family members who had supported her theft were now dealing with the fallout of their choices. My parents had lost a son, my sister had lost half her family's respect, and their marriage was starting off under a mountain of debt. The final twist came almost a year later when I received a Facebook message from my sister's husband. He had apparently discovered the truth about where the money for their wedding upgrades had come from. He was furious and demanded to know why I hadn't told him about the theft before the wedding. He claimed he never would have married my sister if he had known she was capable of stealing from family. He was filing for divorce and wanted to know if I would be willing to testify about the theft in court. The message was long and detailed, describing how my sister had lied to him about the source of the money, claiming it was a gift from our parents. He had only discovered the truth when my grandmother mentioned it during a family gathering. I never responded to his message, but I heard later that their divorce was finalized within 6 months. My sister was forced to move back in with our parents, and her ex-husband made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why their marriage had failed. The shame and isolation she experienced was a fraction of what she had put me through, but it was something. Looking back now, I realized that canceling her bridal shower was the best decision I could have made. It forced everyone to confront the truth about what had happened and ended the family's ability to pretend everything was normal. My sister learned that actions have consequences, and the rest of the family learned that I wouldn't be their scapegoat anymore. The experience taught me that sometimes the people who are supposed to love and support you unconditionally are the ones who will hurt you the most. It also showed me the importance of standing up for yourself, even when it costs you relationships. I lost my family, my fiancé, and my wedding, but I gained something more valuable: my self-respect and the knowledge that I won't tolerate being treated like a doormat. Today, I'm in a much better place. I've built a new life with new friends who actually respect me. I've been dating someone wonderful for the past few months, and while we're taking things slow, I'm optimistic about the future. I've also learned to be more careful about who I trust and to protect myself better from people who might take advantage of my generosity. The wedding fund has been rebuilt slowly but surely. This time, I'm the only one with access to it, and I've made sure to keep my financial information completely private. I've also reconnected with a few family members who reached out after hearing the full story, including my grandmother, who has been incredibly supportive throughout this entire ordeal. My sister has tried to reach out several times over the years, usually around holidays or family events. She's claimed to have changed, to have learned from her mistakes, and to want to make things right. But I've learned that some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and some relationships are too damaged to repair. The last I heard, she was struggling as a single mother, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Part of me feels sorry for her, but a bigger part remembers how she looked at me when I confronted her about the theft. There was no remorse, no understanding of what she had done to me. There was only entitlement, and the expectation that I would just accept being robbed because we shared the same parents. I've made peace with the fact that I may never have a relationship with my immediate family again. It's painful, especially during holidays and major life events, but it's also liberating. I no longer have to worry about being taken advantage of or having my trust betrayed by the people who should be protecting me. The whole experience taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about mutual respect, support, and love. My biological family failed that test spectacularly, but I've found a chosen family of friends and loved ones who actually care about my well-being. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they're with people you're supposed to love unconditionally. If I could go back and change anything, I wouldn't. Canceling that bridal shower was the moment I finally stood up for myself and refused to be a victim anymore. It was the beginning of my journey toward building a life based on respect rather than manipulation and guilt. My sister may have stolen my wedding fund, but she inadvertently gave me something much more valuable: the strength to choose my own family and the wisdom to protect myself from those who would harm me.